You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Paul Roisin. Tonight, we're delighted to be joined by outgoing Fine Gael Councillor for the Callan Thomastown electoral area on Kilkenny County Council, Patrick O'Neill. Patrick was first elected to Kilkenny County Council in 2014 for the Kilkenny East electoral area, and in 2016-17, Patrick was also mayor of Kilkenny city and some of the surrounding areas. Pat was re-elected in the new electoral area of Callan Thomastown in 2019, and in 2020 he contested the general election for Fine Gael as part of their election ticket for the Carlow Kilkenny constituency, in which he polled over 3,000 for first preferences. So tonight, Patrick O'Neill, you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup. Now, in September, you announced locally that you won't be contesting the local elections next May June. That must have been a difficult decision to make.
Good evening, Paul and Roisin. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, look, it's been a decision that wasn't easy to come to, but I suppose it's something that's been on my mind probably since the birth of my first child, which was about 3 years ago. I suppose I had to kind of reassess life regarding work, politics, family, and everything that came along with it. And look, it's just the day job has got busier, a lot busier. I've probably moved up the ladder a small bit there in work. I have a lot more responsibility. It's harder for me to get away from meetings. Obviously now, yeah, married with a couple of two kids now, 3 and 1. So they're keeping me busy. I'm farming a bit at home here with dad as well over the last couple of years since we moved home. And look, something had to give at some stage. And to be honest, politics is probably the only thing that I could give up, at the end of the day. So, look, it wasn't an easy decision to make because I enjoy what I do, but it's just I'm stretched in too many different ways, and to be honest, I feel I haven't been doing the job well enough over the last year to 2 in particular.
Yeah, that is challenging because it is how would you say, it's the days of it being a kind of like a part-time role are pretty much gone. Like it is full-time whether people agree with it or not.
Well, like the meetings are all pretty much, all the official meetings are during working hours, So like I've been very lucky with my employer's transfer mate for the last 7 years that have been so understanding and allowing me to do what I've done, take time off for elections, go to meetings during working hours. To put things in place for me to be able to cover and work back different hours, etc. Yeah. And it's just, yeah, like without that I wouldn't have been able to do it for as long as I have, and that has to be noticed, and I'm very eternally grateful to them for allowing me to do that. But it can only go on for so long, to be honest. And like you said, look, it has I think with the scrutiny in politics over the last 10 years, even though the councillor's role is quite small in the greater scheme of things, but it is a very busy job. And if you want to be elected, you nearly have to act like you're a national politician with all these powers, even though you probably don't, which we'll probably get to a bit later. But it's, with at the advent of social media as well, in particular, the scrutiny that comes on it, like you have to be on top of your game all the time. There's no let up. If you're not out there and in the public arena, you're going to get left behind. And a lot of political battles are won and lost now online more so than anywhere else these days. If you think back to the last local and general election where Sinn Féin lost all their council seats here in Carlow Kilkenny, and we're on a fierce downward trajectory, and then a very clever kind of online campaign, to a certain extent, not all of it, but some of it, won them 18,000 votes here in the space of 7 or 8 months. So it's incredible how quick it can turn.
Some turn around when you think about it. And you come from your dad he was county councillor, and he was a senator. Were you always interested in politics, Pat, or was it just something that you were naturally going to gravitate towards?
I suppose I never really had any thought. So dad was elected in 2004, and that was, I can remember Phil Hogan and Billy Ireland calling to our house asking Dad would he stand at that time, because Dad was kind of, at the time there was a bit of aggro here over the motorway being moved, the location being moved. Let's say I think it was further on towards the quarry, let's say in Rosone up our way, and the quarry had put an objection, and it ended up being moved closer to the village of Bennettsbridge. So there's a local group that Dad was chair of that kind of tried to fight that, and that's how he kind of, I suppose, got into the public limelight, I suppose, of being someone maybe that a political party would like to stand for them. So I remember when Phil and Billy came, and he kind of laughed it off and said, "No way, lads, not a chance." And they were persistent and came back again, and they managed to twist his arm, and that's where that started. But it was my own side of it, I suppose. I've always been kind of someone that always wasn't shy of getting involved in groups, organizations, playing a leading role, let's say, in anything, whether it be captain of any kind of hurling or soccer team, wherever it may be. Or I remember a time where I was asked to go to the Croke Park on behalf of Kilkenny for the GAA Youth Congress one time. There was a youth meeting in Kilkenny, and I was picked out of the group. There was 2 or 3 of us, I think, picked out to go up to Dublin to represent Kilkenny that time. So whatever I did that night, I suppose someone spotted something in me. Even though I think back on it now, I suppose it maybe was the start of, me maybe showing that my will to get involved and to take the lead on certain things. And from there, I suppose I went to college, did my Leaving Cert, went to college, studied civil engineering in UL. And then I suppose that was 2010. We would have graduated straight into the middle of the recession, which was obviously the worst industry affected was construction. So at the time then, now politics wasn't something really on my mind. Dad was obviously quite an effective and good politician. He decided to run for the Senate in 2011. I had a few job offers abroad with CISC, who I worked for on my placement. But I stayed at home while Dad was on the farm, while Dad was on the Senate campaign, which was whatever, a 4 or 5 month campaign up and down the country. So then he was obviously elected there. So it was hard for me to get away. Obviously, he was in Dublin 3 or 4 days a week with that. So, and to be honest, it never really crossed my mind when he was elected to the Senate. To be honest, Jane Galway, if you remember her, was co-opted his seat. A very good, young, capable female candidate at that time here in Bennettsbridge. And she did 3 years or so on the council. In that time, got married, had her first child, and decided it wasn't for her anymore. So that's kind of where the opportunity arose. And to be honest, the first time I heard of it was I walked into the butcher's in Bennettsbridge, and one of the local Fianna Fáil members told, it was about 9 months before the election, "I hear you're running next year's local elections, Patrick." And I said, "No, you haven't a clue what you're talking about." I said, "First I heard of it." And at this point, Jane was still going as far as I knew. And I kept hearing that of all sorts of people. I was working, doing Board B farm inspections. So I was out in farms daily, and a lot of farmers were saying that they were wishing me luck. And I was like, "Lads, you're wrong. I'm not standing." And I think it was at John Bryan's IFA end of term dinner in Killeen Hill, where I think John Paul and Phil Hogan and Mary Hilda and Pat Dunphy and all these came over to me and wished me the best luck with my campaign. And it was like shaking my head going, "What is going on here?" So I was driving that night, and I cornered Dad in the car on the way back, and I said, "Dad, what the hell is going on here? Why am I getting asked all these questions?" And he said, "Well, look, the headquarters want you to run, but I don't think you should." And I was like, "Well, at least ask me and let me make up my own mind." So I thought about it, and I said I felt I was part of that generation that would have maybe suffered the most out of the recession at that time. And I felt it was right. I was working a job that it was flexible enough at the time, and I thought it was worth giving it a go and seeing could I be something different to what was already there, as a young candidate. And that was the start of it.
Yeah, and you were subsequently elected to Kilkenny City East, which was an absolute monster of a constituency.
It was a tricky area, all right, for sure.
Now, straight from outside Dunmore, which for our viewers, that's where Kilkenny's training complex is. It took in good chunk, half of Kilkenny City, went all the way down to like Greg Manor, Orange, the place like that.
Ross,
so it was an absolutely monster constituency.
Yeah. So look, we had. Yeah, it was and that was again, I wouldn't have done a whole lot of canvassing over the years, as would have been in college and away when a lot of the elections were going on. So it was quite new to me. And you learn as you go. And yeah, look, there's no doubt that having Dad there behind me was obviously a great help, and he had a good record. But I suppose I always tried to keep myself as different as possible, and I didn't want to be doing it on the back. I didn't want to be that guy who was just thrown into a seat because his dad was a politician before him, and he was was a good politician. Like you do see it over the years that, and look, I think I have no issue with following on family in politics. I think politics is something that is kind of learned and understood from generation to generation to a certain extent. It is a bit of a vocation. It's not easy. And but again, like, I don't think anyone should ever be in the role unless they really feel they can do it and contribute and achieve, take it on to another level from their previous family member. And I always try to be that bit different to what Dad was. And again, we are different personalities. He's definitely he enjoys the rough and tumble of politics more than I would. I generally try and work a bit quieter in the background and do things behind the scenes more so. But it's just slight different personalities in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And the role of a county councillor, it's very varied, but it can be a very rewarding role, but it can also be very frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, like it's a funny position, really. Like it's I suppose since 2014, where was the first election where a lot of town councils were abolished, the borough council in Kilkenny was abolished. It was a bit of a kind of a hybrid system there, which obviously wasn't ideal. And yeah, like a lot of local government powers have been kind of diluted back towards national departments and national government, and we're depending a lot on handouts from there to really, and even decisions to a certain extent are, a lot of them are made nowadays that, Kilkenny County Council will put forward their proposals and the department will decide on whether they get, it comes out of a national pot more so than what goes on locally. And the one thing, like I suppose every year in my time, the budget, I suppose we started, I think, with roughly 70 million budget in 2014. I think the budget there this year now is roughly 110 million. So like we've nearly doubled, like do my maths, but basically we're nearly
doubled it, yeah.
Nearly double. Well, yeah, it's 100, whatever the percentage is, but like it's gone. The cost of everything, the services we're providing, the projects that Kilkenny are trying to achieve. It's an ambitious council. In fairness, we've had some very good executive members over in my time. There hasn't been any there that you could say were contributing to the betterment of Kilkenny into the future. They all were very passionate about what they did, and it was met, I suppose, with good active councillors who were able to make the right decisions at the right time on certain projects to make sure that Kilkenny was in a good place. But look, as councillors, I suppose you might have seen me I might have talked to you, Paul, on radio about it a few times, but like the development plan was a good example of it all there a couple of years back, about 2 years ago now. Whereas, we were asked for our contribution to the development plan, which is the Kilkenny development plan at the end of the day. And I suppose the executive had their ideas, which were, a lot of it was based off blanket national policy across different departments. But we made a few amendments to certain things. I think wind energy was one. The main one really was the wind energy stuff. We made a couple of changes. I think we reduced the area from 90% of the county to 80% that was acceptable for wind development. And we thought that was fair. It was well within what we were going to achieve within our climate plans. But, we're being then dictated. Well, we were told not to do it because basically we would get written to saying we had to change our mind. So again, that happened, and we said no, we're sticking to our plans. And then when the planning regulator didn't get his way, it then gets referred to the minister to overrule us, which still hasn't been done officially, but is more likely going to happen over the next. It's crazy. That's 2 years ago, and it still hasn't been finalized. So like that's the kind of stuff you're dealing with. Like a lot of the stuff that we felt is important to Kilkenny is then being overruled by what goes on nationally then as well. So it's very little say we have on anything bar our budget, but at the end of the day, like I think 70 or 80% of our budget is salaries and wages and pensions. So like there's such a minute amount of what we actually have, and the only chance we have of generating money locally are property tax and rates, which are not things you want to be touching that often. We've had to increase the property tax 15% each year for the last 3 or 4 years, which is not ideal, but look, it's a small increase in the majority of cases, but it buys us maybe 1 million or so to cover off some of the services that are there. Inflation has caused havoc, so it hasn't been simple. I don't think people you do need good people in the role of a councillor that kind of know what they're doing and kind of have a bit of understanding and reasoning when it comes to these things, because we all don't like making cuts or adding charges or to people, but we're faced with a choice each year. It's either charge more on rates or property tax or cut services in certain areas. So like at the end of the day, you can play politics with it all you want, but either way, one side is going to suffer. And I've always felt we've taken a fairly diplomatic approach and fairly level-headed approach as a council, and fairness over there's been a few solo runs and stuff over years, which is natural, but you're going to get that pantomime in politics every now and again. But look, it's in general, I think we've kept a pretty steady ship, and I think Kilkenny is in a good place. It's going to be plenty of challenges because those budget issues are not going to go away. But to be fair, national departments are probably going to stump up more for local authorities and governments to achieve because a lot of it is a lot of their plans are being put back on us, but they're not giving us the money to achieve it as fast as they would like.
And Pat, there's various studies out there, like if you compare local government in this country, in Ireland, to say other parts of Europe, we're one of the weakest. I think we're like the third weakest or something. If you wanted to have a real functioning local government system, what extra powers would be needed?
Yeah, it's a very dangerous game, having power, Paul. Because the more power you have, then the more problems you're going to get into. So like it's a good question. It's you want an efficient system at the end of the day, and I suppose I just feel there's so much stuff gone into national departments, and I think now one thing, I suppose, look, in principle, as a whole, the water rates and charges thing that went on years and years ago, in principle, I would have been in favour of a nominal water charge that was going on at the time. Look, I know how bad our water infrastructure is after having worked as a councillor for 10 years. And, I think paying €160 or whatever it was at the time would have been great value for money to maybe make the improvements of what has gone on. But one thing I've noticed, though, Irish Water is a very frustrating organisation and not that easy to work with or kind of get through to. Now, in fairness, some of the staff there they meet as a quarterly and they come out and they do their bit, but it's a bit of a toothless organisation because it actually doesn't really have any proper powers. It needs money from government to do what it does. I suppose I would like to see the council having a bit more power still within the water services. Now, again, look, we do put our recommendations forward as to where that we find Irish Water should be putting money towards, which to a certain extent, in fairness, they're going to agree in principle with most of what we say. The
concept of a national water utility makes sense, but it's like everything, it's how it works. And
it was handled very badly. There's no doubt. It was handled very badly at the time. There's no doubt about it. I don't think politicians should have kind of bowed down as easy as they did to it, though, because I just see it, like particularly in my area around Bennettsbridge and surrounds, like just constant water shutoffs here due to leakages, and we've had issues in the treatment centre, and we've had issues in the in the plant in Norlands with supply due to lack, because there's just leaks everywhere. The supply isn't there. We've had new bore wells put in, new river supplies put in, trying to keep up with demand. And like it was a year there, I think we were shutting off every night, or for 3 months we were shutting off every night at 10 o'clock and back on them. It was just, when you see that going on, and it got very frustrating. But planning is a big thing too. I think people have this idea that councillors have a lot of say in planning and stuff. Now, we do have a say in when it comes to development plans, all right, but when you see what goes on, a lot of what we were trying to do in development plans is generally, if it doesn't agree with national policy, we'll be thrown back and saying, sorry lads, you're not allowed to do this because we don't agree with you. But planning is getting very frustrating from a political perspective, because in rural areas in particular, which I represent and a lot of us represent on the council, services are not there for people to either build a group housing scheme, or whether it would be to build a one-off rural house. Most cases now we have to drill your own well. It's very frustrating, and like a lot of the national policy nowadays is pushing people more towards city centres, the bigger urban areas. And that is causing an issue with their housing crisis. There's no doubt about it. People are finding it very hard to get planning, and in areas where they wouldn't have had issues in the past, and some of the environmental stuff gets in the way then as well. And it's you're getting a lot more scrutiny on environmental stuff for one-off houses than you would have been 5, 6, 7 years ago. So, all these things, even though they look quite small in on paper, are contributing, I suppose, to people struggling to, because they can't build. They're going to look to buy in the market, which is again another person that is trying, driving up prices, and and that's another aspect that can be very frustrating. And yeah, I suppose, look, when it comes to development plans and everything, I think, look, in climate, environment, everything is hugely important. And I think as a council at the time when we were doing our development plan, we were very understanding of that. We weren't looking to try and take whole areas out of the county that we said, no way are you going to put any renewable energy in any of these areas. We were just trying to be practical, and still wasn't good enough, and we felt we were representing the areas and the people that would have been, contacting us, very reasonable people with very reasonable concerns, and it all, we felt we could achieve what we needed to achieve with what we already had. We didn't need to go this extra step. But you can see now, I think there's 7 or 8 active wind energy applications across Kilkenny. There's a number of solar ones, not as controversial, but like it's a big issue. Wind energy is going to be a huge issue on the doorsteps for a lot of councillors in the next election, and to a certain extent we feel we have fought as hard as we could, but it's been thrown back in our face. And we've let even the communities we represent, you can't blame them for thinking that we haven't done a whole lot for them, but unfortunately there wasn't actually anything we could do, because all these projects can skip the council planning process, go straight to An Bord Pleanála. So it's not ideal.
If you were to look at an example of where local government, there's a big deficit or weakness, what you spoke about there, Pat, is kind of like an example. Like, you've done everything what you can within your powers, and then central government says, no.
And like that's it. It's kind of suits in Dublin that have no foot on the ground here within departments that are making policy and forcing these things on us without any kind of understanding of what actually goes on the ground in these areas. Like, at the end of the day, like I would have done a thesis on wind energy. I'm very pro wind energy, but like the idea of putting up massive wind turbines in near, rural populations, like in an industrial scale, it just doesn't make any sense to me when we have the whole coastline there. And I know it has its challenges, and it's there's no planning there at the moment for it, and I know it's more expensive and everything goes along with it. But surely 2 or 3 large-scale wind projects off the coast would get us out the gap, instead of having to put little bits here and little bits there and divide communities and drive everyone spare. Like, it just, as a country, it just doesn't make sense to me. And it's like, I just think it's been handed off now to private developers to make their money. And, fair play to them. Look, at the end of the day, it's an open market. They're entitled to do what they want. But I just think we've gone about it the whole wrong way. And I think you would have got a bit of buy-in from Irish people to say, look, I know the people on the coast will say, oh, you're going to ruin our views and this, that, and the other, blah. But I don't think you're really going to, if a wind turbine is 2 kilometers off the coast, and on a good day you might see it through the haze, I don't think it's really going to cause that much of an issue. From an aesthetic perspective, all right, you're going to have marine and all sorts of wildlife issues potentially, but look, I know it's not that simple, but it's I just think it's a missed opportunity, and something that we're not really, like, it goes back to the Shannon LNG project. Again, 100% agree we need to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and work away from them going in forward. But why not have access to a reserve off our own coast in a situation like the war in Russia and Ukraine, like any emergency situation that could arise? If Britain turn off that supply, or France, we are screwed. So, like, it just, ideology is great in a way, but like, at the end of the day, and the world is in a very, very kind of volatile place at the moment. You don't know what's around the corner, and not to have our own access to our own resources in an emergency situation is just crazy to me. We should always be looking after ourselves here and protecting ourselves in the case of any emergency situation. And that's where the wind energy off the coast and scale that would be something that would be useful to us, and something that we could be selling back potentially to Europe on the other side.
But
absolutely. Look, it's kind of been a rush job because everything environmentally has been kind of alarmist and everyone is kind of panicking, trying to get things done and try and hit targets so they don't get fined and this, that, and the other. And I just, again, it goes back to what farmers are going through now as well. It's not simple being a farmer anymore because you're getting a lot of bad press, which is a lot of it is unfounded and unrealistic, and you're not getting a lot of credit for a lot of good work that you're doing. And we're attacking all the wrong areas in Ireland, frustrating a lot of our good aspects, our good communities, our rural communities, our farmers, like what makes our economy. We're really, it's a frustrating time, and it'll be it's going to be another interesting 10 years to see how we achieve it. But I just hope we don't do too much damage to our own Indigenous industries at the same time.
Do you think has politics lost its community? We have the national politics and we have local politics, and that's all about the community, isn't it? Community politics gone, in your opinion?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Like you see a lot across a lot of areas, it's even getting harder to get people involved in community groups as a whole. People are gone so busy nowadays, whether it's work, family, whatever it may be, and everything in every organization. It's so hard to do anything. The red tape, the paperwork, everything that goes along with it, of even just doing a simple application to apply for some funding from a certain organization. The work that goes into it, like it's so difficult, and anyone taking on any of these roles. And I'm involved in a lot of organizations, and they're all struggling for people to try and get new people involved. And it starts there. And that's where often you get a lot of good new people who might take a step into politics from a lot of those groups. They naturally are kind of leaders in the community, and there may be people that political parties would look at and approach to say, look, will you maybe stand for us in an election, and go from there. So I think that's one aspect of it. Community groups are struggling nowadays, whether it be tidy towns or development groups or whatever it may be, just to keep going. And then like it's like how much it's how many things. So when you're on the council, like you have your council meetings, but then you're on, let's say if you're on the ETB, like I'd have 5 board meetings a quarter. They all kind of come around the same week or two. You have board meetings every month with the ETB, or on your SVC meetings. Like I had to miss 2 of them there Thursday because I had work meetings, like they come fairly regularly. You have budget time, you have like where's the time for you then? Then you could have community meetings in the evenings at home and whatever else you're involved in. And it's just like, it's never ending. And it's but there is definitely a disconnect, Roisin, from national politicians, what's actually going on the ground. And I've been at numerous meetings nationally with Fine Gael as councillors. The TDs and ministers have met with us, and we've like some fantastic contributions, so accurately describing what's going on in the ground in our communities. And they listen, but it doesn't really seem to sink in. And actually, whether it goes back to the staff in the department saying, no, lads, this is not practical or it's not going to work, I don't know. But I definitely feel that communities don't feel any real connection to politicians as much anymore. And look, to a certain extent, I think there was too much parish pump politics in Ireland for a long time. Like at the end of the day, as a TD, your role is to write and make laws within the country and policy that is going to make people's lives better. It's not really like our job is filling the potholes and doing all these bits and pieces. You know what I mean? Like and
they're important too, the potholes.
100%. But like it's no, but like it's I think we kind of expect. I think as people, I think we kind of forget that our councillors are there for a lot of the job. So like TDs are getting calls for things that really councillors should be called on. And that at the end of the day, a TD wants to get elected in the next election. So they're going to go after all these calls, and they're going to take their time to do it. And I just think, and I know it goes back to politicians get off a lot of bad press for what they're paid and this, that, and the other. But like, I'll be honest, I think we're actually underpaying our politicians. I know it's not a popular thing to say, but if we want good people involved in politics, you're going to have, if they can get it in the private sector, you're going to have to pay them better to do the job that you want them to do. And it's not an easy job, and it's a very, very difficult job. And this, it's a very highly qualified job as well. At the end of the day, when it comes to scrutinizing laws and policy and everything goes along with it, like that is serious work, and you need you need to be capable of doing it. I know you're going to have staff that are going to be able to read through these things and brief you and do this and the other, but it's a pretty high pressure job at the end of the day. And there is only at the end of the day, there'll be 180 odd of them after the next election. But I know people won't thank me or like me for saying it, but I just think it's the reality of the situation nowadays. There's a lot of good national politicians getting out as well because they can see a better future in the private sector, and that's I don't blame them to a certain extent.
Are TD's hands tied as well then? That they're going up to Dublin, they're taking the grassroots information from the county councillors, they're taking that up to Dublin on a national level, and are their hands equally as tied as the county councillors' hands?
I wouldn't think so, because at the end of the day, I know there's budgets in each department, and the civil servants are going to be, they're not facing election. Their job is their job, and they're going to be prudent, and they're going to train it, and they're going to have their own targets in their own departments, and they need to achieve this, that, and the other. And at the end of the day, so anytime a political party or government comes and changes laws or policy or whatever it may be, it's going to affect certain departments, and they're going to have to maybe chop and change budgets to facilitate certain changes. So it's not an easy trade-off at the end of the day. Yeah. Generally a lot of it is achieved through consensus, and politics, when you see politics in the drama of the Dáil and everything goes along with it, you don't see a whole lot of consensus. You just see a lot of bickering back and forth. That's kind of, there's a lot of it's disappointing from time to time. You rarely see any kind of cooperation from all sides of the house, which
like a theatre. It's like going to the Abbey or going down to the Watergate. It's like a theatre.
Like you would see it at county council meetings. Like there is at the end of, I know there's an agreement in Kilkenny between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, but each meeting, every councillor has their say. Each part, like it's very rarely you have this negative kind of, we're going against this crowd just because we want to go against them, or we're going to take this side of this argument and we're just going to go with it, even though we don't necessarily maybe agree with it all. We're just going with it for the headlines and this, that, and the other. You don't see that at a local level. Like at national level, it is more of a charade. There is, an aspect of, trying to score points against parties, and what's happened more in recent times is gets very personal, which was not something. I know political parties traditionally, historically, haven't got along. Well, I've always felt there was a bit of respect there and kind of a common decency and courtesy kind of how people were spoken to, or how people spoke to each other. That is definitely changing as well. And you see from both sides of the house, you know what I mean? It's getting personal. There's insults coming from all sides. People's, whether it be their criminal background or their arrest background or they're up in this investigation or that it's just, there's videos being pulled out of people from seeing stuff they've said 15 years ago, and like when times are different, and it's all making it's just it was frustrating life out here, because in general, we have a strong economy, and I know that's great on paper, but people aren't feeling it, and it's because and I think the media have a lot to play in it as well. I think the message they give out and how it plays, with people's thought processes. And look, there's no doubt people are struggling in a lot of areas, and the government at the end of the day is going to pay the price for it, unless they can sort things in the next year or 14 months, whatever it may be. But the foundations are there to improve a lot of what we do if we had a consensus, and we just can't seem to. Now, whether it's through department-led stuff, like there is inefficiencies within departments, like the health service, for example, is a prime example. Like that is it's a complete monster. But look, you look at the NHS, it's not too dissimilar. It has its issues. It's just a big beat of a thing, and money just goes into it and just seems to disappear. And can you realistically take that apart and rebuild it? Without probably three terms of government needed to actually implement a whole sea change of the whole thing. It's realistically, you have to be realistic with these things. It's probably not doable for any political party to do, because you're not going to last 15 years in government, because people, at the end of the day, human nature is to get sick of you, and sick of the same faces, and the only way of staying in is buying your way probably in. And that, you see what happened is plenty of times in Ireland over the years, and we don't want that to happen again. So but
we want to have politicians that we know and we trust, and I think that's really important for the voter. and for the people of Ireland to know that you have to, we're going to disagree with politicians, we're going to fall out, but we want to know that the politicians, and we wouldn't mind paying for a good, good salaries for politicians if the country was being run really well, and that's what we want. So we wouldn't, I suppose, for me, if there was a politician in there all his life as a politician, if they were looking after the interest of the country and the people and getting the job done, we would all be delighted.
Yeah, I like you see a lot of national and even creeps into local politics sometimes. Like we get a lot of stuff coming to in the past now, not so much in the last term, in this current term, but in the past we would have got a lot of motions put forward and stuff that is completely and utterly irrelevant to Kilkenny County Council and our meetings. And all it does is waste time for stuff that we could be debating that is actually relevant to Kilkenny, stuff that we have absolutely zero say or power over. We're not going to make any difference what we say or do. It's sound bites. It's kind of like, and it goes on a national level as well. And you see politicians fanning the flames of tensions between Israel and Gaza, and you see them, Russia, Ukraine to a certain extent is a bit smaller, obviously, but I suppose you take Israel and Palestine, obviously, is more. There seems to be, there is a big following of Palestine within Ireland. I think due to obviously the way Ireland is historically a split across the country there, with the north and the south, and I suppose there is an element of sympathy there with a lot of Irish people for Palestine. But you see Irish politicians kind of fanning the flames of either side of that, and it's just not a good look. I just think it's an awful thing to be getting. We are neutral in it at the end of the day. We want people to stop dying, innocent people to stop dying. That's the only message that should be there. We shouldn't be standing up at a Palestinian march and going death to Israel, pretty much, or saying vice versa. That is not Ireland, and it's not what would represent me. And there's a lot of people in middle Ireland. I think there's 80% of the population that are just so down the middle that are not really being heard anymore. Politics has gone so far to the extreme of the left and the right, and that's all you seem to hear in media is the extreme views on anything. And there's that center ground of people that are like so, are so kind of level-headed with everything and kind of say, look, I see this side, I see that side. Ireland is exemplary in its history of being able to bring peace to other areas because of what we achieved on our own island. And now we just seem to be kind of, you see what goes on in Europe with, I suppose that's where you see the Russian stuff with some of our MEPs. And like, it just gives us an awful image. And, and it doesn't really, and I think there is a lot of, center ground people in Ireland, and it kind of does disgust them, but they don't really seem to be heard, or those views are never really put across.
Is it because it doesn't make column inches and it doesn't make sensationalism? I've noticed over the last couple of years, we have to, on our social media, I stand with this, I stand with that, it seems to be this populism of actually posting up, I stand with this, and not standing with Ireland. Ireland should be first and center.
You basically look, as I said earlier, the world is in a very volatile place, and it goes back to, you see America with Trump, Brexit, Putin, what he's doing in Russia. You see obviously there's varying different Islamic terrorist groups. There's obviously the more recent one was the Hamas attack that crop up from time to time. China obviously has its own style and is, you never know what's around the corner with China. Like the world at the end of the day is going through a very populist phase, and you see far right parties doing well across Europe in a lot of elections, and that is probably down to people feeling they're just not being heard, at the end of the day, and that's a lot of it. And populism really doesn't work. We've seen it in the past. Like, we've seen what destruction has gone on globally with what goes on with populism and idealism, that really, at the end of the day, all it does is cause death and destruction across the globe. And we are on that path again at the moment. And I don't know how we're going to really get out of it, because it's happening in Ireland as well. Like, a lot of what we see is populism. We had the riots in Dublin, which, have been, I suppose, look, I wouldn't call them far right or far left. They're far idiots is all they were, the whole lot of them.
I thought the riots Pat, I'm from Derry, and I just thought the riots was. I've never seen anything like this in Dublin. It was just like being back in the Bogside in the height of the Troubles.
Yeah.
I mean, and that takes organising. That takes, that just doesn't happen. And I felt for the Guard of Síochána. I really did. And I just think, oh my God, that was the way it was in the height of the Troubles in the Bogside or in the Shankill or the Falls Road. That isn't Dublin.
Yeah.
And, that to me was, we're from Kilkenny and we're a very proud military city. And our 123 Infantry Battalion is over from the 3rd Battalion over in South Lebanon. And I find it very sort of astonishing that all these politicians are going, oh, I stand with this. And as you were saying, Palestine, Israel, or Palestine, and I'm going, not one of them has said, what a wonderful job in the Dáil. What a wonderful job our
peacekeepers are
doing. And I find that as a member of a defence force, member, I find that why not one of them has mentioned our defence forces, in the Dáil, what a wonderful job they've done in exceptional circumstances.
100%. And our defence forces in my time in politics, anyway, in 10 years, I can remember meeting numerous army men and retired army people, let's say over my first election, 2014, on the doorsteps, and they were extremely frustrated at that time. And it still hasn't changed.
No.
And look, we're a small nation at the end of the day, but we've had a fantastic history of working the UN and on peacekeeping missions. And as we're very well thought of as a peacekeeping nation. And when it comes to UN work, and at the end of the day, that's as much as probably our army can achieve, along with the work it does behind the scenes in Ireland. Like we're not going to be a force that's going to invade anyone if Britain or whoever decides to land on our shores with 200,000 men, we're not going to be able to do a whole lot about it. We just don't have the numbers. But it's we excel in what we do with our Irish our army and the work that they do abroad. Is renowned, and what they've done over the years and the sacrifice they've made. And they're in a difficult situation now in Lebanon, so close to the issues that are going on there. And they're the people we should be talking about. You're right, and we. Well, look, to be fair, civilians in both sides are obviously need to be talked about as well. That's
the innocent people. It's the innocent people who are caught in the middle, in the villages that are being bombed, and also it's the people who can't afford to leave who are there.
And the thing is, when it comes back to these riots as well, I suppose, and we were probably asleep at the wheel, whether as a government or as a guard force or whatever it may be. We're not. We're a developed country. We're not we have an open nowadays. The world is an open place when it comes to news and where you can see everything from all over the world nowadays. And we're not alien. We're not like little old Ireland is not going to be able to avoid a lot of the issues that other countries see. And we had to be aware that someday, the way the world is going, that we were going to get this extreme night, like that riot that happened, and the guard, I've a lot of friends who are in the guards, and they're very, very frustrated as well with everything that goes on. And hopefully this is maybe a watershed moment for them to get more resources of what they actually need to deal with situations like this, because unfortunately for the foreseeable, they're probably going to be more likely to happen than they have been in the past. And at the end of the day, they need to be given the power and the support to deal with it. At the end of the day, you see so many stupid cases now where if the guard defends himself, there's anything, they're nearly put on leave until their case is heard within GSOC or whatever it may be. Like that case of where the guard was chasing some guy down the motorway. He turned off down the wrong side of the motorway, three or four burglars, and they got killed. And the guard is still, I think the guy, was he suspended or whatever happened anyway? He was up in front of GSOC for the whole thing. And another case of a guy giving an elderly person a bike that wasn't claimed during COVID, and he's been suspended for 3 years or something. It's mad stuff. The guards are literally, they're.
The morale has hit rock bottom.
But as they tell me, they go out and they arrest some guy and they bring him to court, and he's so many other convictions, and they go up in court and they get him convicted again, and then he's let out in a suspended sentence, or he's let out again, and they why would they bother going to arrest him again next week? When the judge and they're just going to let him out again, it just defeats the whole purpose of the whole thing. We're either going to get serious about it or we're not. And this is kind of, it's been seeping into society now to a certain extent. There's a certain element of society that think they can do what they want and get away with it, and they're happy to go to court and get their free legal aid and this, that, and the other. Like, why wouldn't we draft legislation the next morning going, any of the guys are arrested for those riots the other night, no free legal aid for you guys. Stand up in court and defend yourself as to what you were doing that night. You were attacking the state. You were attacking our Gardaí. You know, defend yourself. Why were we paying for you to, like, you know, we either get, you know, you're fighting extremes. You nearly have to get extreme back at the end of the day. And there's just no respect there for society, for the law, the land, for politicians, for the government. You know, everything goes along with it. We've, you know, and again, look, I don't want to sound that I'm like, yes, of course we have to, there's going to be people in society that aren't as well off or have the best chance in life as others, and we have to do our best to help them and try and help them have a better chance of achieving something in their lives. But it gets to a point where you just have to come down hard, and you know, you cannot see people out with 70, 80, 90 convictions still on the streets and doing what they want, and the guards seeing them and they're laughing at them. Like, it's just, yeah, like that is just crazy in a developed country like ours. And I know we don't have the prison space and everything go along with it, but you know, we're going to have to do something about it, because it's not going to change, and it drives people absolutely insane. And it's the good, innocent, middle class people who pay the price for it, whether it be the crimes that go on or the pay for the taxes to pay for the free legal aid of everything goes on with it. You know, it's a frustrating system.
And Pat, you know that you're talking about there a lot about law and order. Of course, your colleague Helen McEntee is the Minister for Justice, and Fine Gael have been in government since 2011. Of course, you ran in the 2020 general election, which wasn't a great result for Fine Gael at the time. Where do you see them now currently with this government of themselves, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party, which will probably, there could be election maybe this time next year?
Yeah, you're probably looking at
general elections.
February 2025. You're looking at general election. I think that's that's when the term is up. But yeah, where do I see Fine Gael and the government? Like, look, they're in. Fine Gael at the end of the day, by the time the next, what will be 14 years in government by the time the next election comes around, it's a long time for any party to be in government. We're showing all the signs of a party that has government fatigue at the end of the day. More so not from lack of effort or trying from our ministers and our TDs. It's just people get a bit bored and sick of you. Like, that's just human nature. And, you know, it's very hard to, and look, I still think Fine Gael as a party have the best front bench offering across any party. You know, I think we have the most capable politicians across them as regards and experience now across parties. Like, there's 14 years there of knowledge and like dealing with crises such as like Brexit. We've had the war in Ukraine. We've had COVID. Like, in fairness, there's been a fair chunk of those 11 or 12 years at the moment that things haven't been straightforward or simple. The first part of that was the recession and coming out of that and building jobs and everything goes along with it. You know, so look, I'm going to obviously say in a lot of cases, we've done a lot of good work, and there's things obviously that we haven't laid a glove on, such as housing in particular, which is a big issue for my generation, our generation, Paul.
Absolutely,
you know, and like, that's going to be the sticking point. And like, I think, you know, we have to hold our hands up at some stage and go, look, we know we haven't made any inroads into this as we would have liked. Look, we have made, you know, there has been this many houses, so many social houses built, so many houses built in the country, but Ireland has been quite a successful country. People are coming here to work. They're able, you know, they're on big money. They're able to buy these houses. Like, we just haven't been able to you know, be honest and say, look, we haven't got where we wanted to get to, and we will keep trying to get there. And it's not going to change with Sinn Féin or anyone else. Like, the policies, you're not going to build houses overnight, and what they say they're going to do is not going to make any bit of difference to the whole thing either. They're just going a different direction, trying to do it a different way. But at the end of the day, there's only a certain amount of land that's there. There's only a certain amount of developers, a certain amount of builders. And, you know, we cannot make houses magically pop up overnight to house everyone. And, you know, like, I just think we probably need to probably a bit more human in it and admit our mistakes, because yeah, they are there at the end of the day. Like, there has been good work done, but we haven't hit the targets that we would have liked, and people aren't like, you can't stand up there on a national debate and say, well, we built 60,000 houses this year, but there's still, like, young people cannot get a mortgage or cannot afford to buy these houses. Like, that is the problem. Like, it's not, I don't think supply is supply is obviously the issue, because prices are so high because of lack of supply. But I think the lending rules need to be probably changed. Look, I know we don't want to go back to the boom and what went on there, but like, I think there can be a bit more leeway given regarding lending and stuff to people in situations. Like, I've seen it myself, how hard it is for us to get a mortgage. It's just crazy. It's just like, the banks are so out of touch with what people are going through and trying to get there. Like, you need a good deposit. It's tough on young professionals. Like, it's very, very hard, and that frustration is there. And I still think at the end of the day, probably Fine Gael are probably the best party that could probably work for them into the future on a fairly level-headed and consistent basis. But at the end of the day, can we blame a young person for going, well, look, I'm going to give someone else a chance? Probably not. Like, you have to be like, you have to be brutally honest about these things. But look, I still think it's going to be tight in the next election. I think I think obviously Sinn Féin will probably be the largest party, unless they have had a few bad-ish polls. Now they're still way up there, but are they starting to come back to the pack a little bit? We'll have to wait and see. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael struggling to kind of really differentiate from themselves to a certain extent nowadays. How do they, how do they be that bit different, that one gets ahead of the other and becomes a more dominant party? And then the Greens are probably on track for a wipeout, no offense to them, to a certain extent. There isn't going to be too many of them left, I would say.
Well, it's going to be a very similar outcome in some sense to the last election. You'd have three large blocks, and two of those blocks will have to come together to form a government, plus another.
Whether it's a wide range of independents, or whether it's the Social Democrats, Labour, whoever it may be. Like, there's going to be an extra 14 or 15 TDs in the Dáil, which will make a big difference. Like, that's a lot of new people, and where they're going to go, where they're going to sit, and it might, and on that basis, like, it might salvage something for the likes of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, as the extra seats available. They might hold on to a few that they might have lost in tighter scenarios, because traditionally you've always seen government parties are always generally transfer toxic, to a certain extent.
Pat, you're not running for re-election. You're very proud Fine Gaeler, coming from a very proud Fine Gael family. For your opinion, how would you like to see Fine Gael move forward? I would imagine Fine Gael are not expecting to go into government next. So how would you like to see Fine Gael regroup and sort of regather itself and reconnect with the people?
To reconnect with their base first. And I think that's probably where we've struggled the most over the last number of years. And I think whether it's because of forming governments, we've gave concessions in a lot of areas which wouldn't be kind of traditionally Fine Gael concessions. And, like, you see farmers are struggling. Traditionally, a good farming vote will be Fine Gael, like close to even 50% at the best of times. The Guards, traditionally, probably naturally a lot of Fine Gael leaning people within the Guards. And again, they're extremely frustrated and annoyed with us. Income earners, people that like all the people that we say we traditionally law and order, everything, like, we haven't really kind of spoken enough about them over the last number of years. We've kind of haven't really had policies there that have made a big enough difference in their lives. I think we've kind of probably chased votes that were never ours. You get them in days where, there's a tide turning to you. You'll get a loan of them for a period, but they'll go back to where they belong once they realize they don't really like you. Like, there's probably a core Fine Gael vote of about 25%, let's say, and there's probably another 10% of people that might consider it on any given day. Like, that's your 35 max on the best day possible. I think 36 they got in 2011 or whatever it was. Like, so those 25% of people are really where we probably should be focusing again, and ensuring that we keep that 25% in the short term. And those people that are Fine Gael voters and want to vote for Fine Gael, but there's a lot of them extremely annoyed with us, and like that's where I think we need to focus. And I think like traditionally,
do you think that the leadership of Fine Gael, and I know I'm probably speaking out of turn and I'm not being anti, but like, do you think that Leo Varadkar go too much of his own PR and believe in his own PR and the media and disconnected from the core base?
Yeah, I don't think Leo is too involved with his own PR. I wouldn't say that about him. Like I like Leo to a certain extent. He frustrates me a bit, all right, for sure. There's no doubt about it.
This isn't personal against Leo.
I think his heart is in the right place, but I think you're right. I think there is an element of kind of those maybe around him that are not probably as clued into what's going on at grassroots within the party. I think they think it'll all be okay and will survive, but you start losing good people on the ground, and not maybe some people not maybe willing to go out and canvass in their areas, like those people going knocking on their neighbours' doors is maybe enough for the neighbours to vote for Fine Gael. But if that person doesn't get out and knock on those 20, 30, 40 doors, there's a fair chance a lot of those people might come out the next time and vote for Fine Gael. Like it's it's such a fickle game, politics, and I'm not an expert, but I think it's quite it's politics is quite simple, and you have to be honest with people. I think you have to be true to your values and your core values as a party and what I suppose traditionally Fine Gael have represented. And I think we've probably drifted a bit away from that. Whether it's true, maybe just different opinions within the party and different style of people have been elected there and had different views to what traditionally Fine Gael had, or whether it's concessions within agreements or whatever it may be, or global issues that maybe they thought were the right thing to do, but maybe have pushed away maybe some of your traditional voters. Like, there's no doubt, Fine Gael traditionally probably been a quite conservative party. So would have been probably the party that would have took the right stance in all the debates, in fairness, around same-sex marriage and abortion, all these things, you know what I mean? But they're very, they're very difficult topics to debate. And, I suppose being the government party, being front and centre of it, it would have probably been better for the party to be supportive, but not having to do when they were leading party, they had to do all the campaigning, they had to do all the pushing of it. And it probably maybe, annoyed some of the core vote within it that they were so, I think there's a lot of the Fine Gael vote that would have been quite middle ground on a lot of it. And, probably, didn't agree with some of the top echelons of the party and how far they were pushing some of these debates. Whereas there were, little things like that, like, and look, I'm not saying like they were completely the right decisions what were made, like the referendums and the votes. Like, there's no doubt they were the right things to do. Freedom of choice at the end of the day is what the world is about. But I think we had, as a party, we probably didn't come out of them as well as we probably thought we would, because I think the voters that generally would have been, the campaigners wouldn't traditionally be kind of center right. They would be probably generally more left leaning, and we were never going to get those votes in the long run at the end of the day. And there was probably a small percentage of core voters that probably felt a bit alienated because they probably felt they weren't being heard, but again, it's so hard to keep everyone happy. Like, it's
but you said to me, and I heard a couple of interviews, that you like to listen to the people you're talking to. You always sit down, and this is something I've heard, you always give people time, and you listen to what your voters are saying, and anybody that's saying. And it seems sad that you feel you have to leave politics when you're such a community man.
Yeah, look, it's such a hard career to make the next step in. At the end of the day, I always felt I would be a far better national politician than I am a local politician, because again, when you have a day job and when you get to the stage then where you do get married and have kids, like, your time is just not there, and you have to prioritize your family at the end of the day in your job. Like, the cost of taking that next step is huge. And again, you just need luck on the day that the wind is blowing in your party's favor. You need someone to retire and step out of the way for you to step in. And like, it's such a hard job to get to the next step. And like, I always told myself I wasn't going to be a councillor forever. I had my go at the Dáil. I kind of knew from a long way out that it wasn't probably going to happen for me. And I was probably quite disappointed when I saw it. I roughly got about 3,700 votes or something, or 3.8, something around that mark, I think. And I was initially disappointed, but when I looked across the country and saw what other first-time Fine Gaelers got, I didn't do that badly. But yeah, look, look, I've always kind of sat with people who I generally feel I probably don't agree with to a certain extent, but I always try and listen to them to kind of hear their point of view, or can we find a middle ground here to move forward with something? At the end of the day, politics is all about compromise to really get anything done. And I'm always, I probably don't push my own point enough, is probably half the problem. But I'm always probably trying to get someone else's point across before I get my own point across. So yeah, look, I will be sorry to, like, I would love to have got to the Dáil, and look, maybe someday that chance will arise again into the future. So I feel like I have the right mindset for it and try and do it the right way. But again, how do you make an impact in a scenario of, you could be in the Dáil, could be in opposition for 20 years and might never get to say anything. Like, it's at the end of the day, look, it'd be great to a certain extent for Fine Gael to get a break and get out of government and have a bit of a break and be able to say what they want and, get on every bandwagon going and do what you want. But, at the end of the day, if you were realistic about making a change to people's lives, government is where it's at, and you have to be in there.
We need politics. We need politics.
Yeah.
And we need...
It's kind of like what Mary Harney said, that the worst day in government is better than the best day in opposition.
Yeah, and it's so true, and like, it's I think Ireland is in a very, very, very interesting place, and I'm hoping, like, we don't go down the route of what has gone on with America and the UK and the way we kind of we cheapen our politics. The state formed out of such difficult times and division within communities and families and everything that went along with it, and the early years of the state were so difficult, and how quick the state grew to what it became, and how, look, and no doubt there were so many issues, like, you see the issues traditionally of what had gone on in the past with close ties to the church and everything that went on there in a previous generation, and we've overcome that now again, and I just hope we don't cheapen our representation and go down the populist route of just voting for sound bites. And what it is, like, we have a very good political system in Ireland. I know local government is probably not the best at the moment, but we have always had good access to our politicians. We've always been able to, there's always a good dispersion of views across the Dáil because of the proportional representation system. And I just hope that we, as a people, kind of think about it hard at the next election, going, what way do we want to go here? Look, yeah, the economy is quite strong. Yeah, we're not maybe feeling it. Do we want to maybe risk it all and go down the populist route, or do we want to maybe give something what's there, maybe one last chance? And here, guys, this is your last chance to really make our lives that bit better. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just think we need to respect, I suppose, what we have as a country. I know it's not a perfect country, but it's a pretty good one. When you look across the globe, it's a pretty good country to live in, no matter what anyone says. And I hate when I see this stuff thrown out that Ireland's a kip and this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. It couldn't be any further from the truth. We have one of the best welfare systems in the world for people that need it. We have, in general, we have a pretty good health service. I know there's a lot of bad press about it, but we have some fantastic hospitals, doctors. A lot of it is based around private healthcare and stuff. But my wife was rushed into hospital a number of months ago, and she couldn't get better treatment in the public system. And, she wasn't left wanting for anything, and had every test under the sun. So, like, it's not all doom and gloom out there. There's a lot of good stuff that goes on.
Do you know what? You sound to me, this is the first time I've ever spoken to you, Patrick. You sound to me like a man of the people. And I think that is something that you have with integrity. You really do feel for your constituents and for the people of Ireland. I think that's what's coming across to me. Regardless of anybody's political affiliation, that's all anybody wants.
Thanks, Roisin. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat to us, Pat. In fairness to you, when I asked you a week ago, you said absolutely no problem, you'd love to do it, and we really do appreciate that. it's a great vote of confidence in the channel.
No problem, Paul. No, in fairness, you've always been very good with your time to me, and asked me on to community radio, whatever it may be, over the years. You've always been, anytime I did decide I needed a bit, it's not often I went looking for any public press releases or anything like that, but in fairness, you pay attention to meetings and stuff that goes on, and you'd spot certain little things that maybe I'd be raising, and you're always quick to give me a chance to maybe explain things in more detail on radio, so it's always very enjoyable to chat to you and anyone across community radio over the years. So yeah, I always try and keep it as straight and as honest as I can without insulting anyone, hopefully.
Very good.
Well, we can't let you go without asking you. Mary Hilda Kavanagh seems to be the mammy of the politics.
Mm-hmm.
And did she take you under her wing in the county chamber?
She did, in fairness to her. Like, she's an incredible woman, and we're lucky to have her within Fine Gael. And I can't, it's amazing that she's standing again. So look, I would have spent my first 5 years sitting beside her on the council, and just learned even just so much about how she operated during meetings, how she got her point across. She always stood up. She's such great integrity. Like, she wouldn't, anytime there was any messing, from time to time there used to be guys get an idea that we're going to go for a few headlines here, there, and everywhere, and she'd be quick to fairly put people back in their place with something they might have said last week or week before, which says the opposite of what we're saying. Like, she was just so well clued in to the research she'd do before meetings, to what's going on in the organisation. She's been, I suppose, the whip of the Fine Gael group in my time for the 10 years. And, she's funny. Like, she just keeps us, she has it all well. She has all the work done for us a lot of the time, to be fair to her. And, she's an incredible woman, and hopefully, fingers crossed, now she'll be successful again next year in the locals, and will be back representing the area she does. And we're lucky to have her in Fine Gael, but we're lucky to have her in Kilkenny. And, as a council, will be better for her there again, no doubt, in 2025 onward, or 2024 onwards.
Councillor Pat O'Neill, thank you for taking the time to talk to Paul and I on the Irish Political Roundup this evening.
No problem, Roisin. Thanks, Paul.